Hi, I'm Glenn Campbell, and I'm running for school board here in the city of Coeur d'Alene in Zone 5. We're here today to talk about critical race theory. My Facebook page has been blown up with people telling me that critical race theory is not being taught in our school district. Well, with me right now is our local CRT scholar who has spent thousands of hours studying what critical race theory is all about. Laura Van Voorhees, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Glenn.
So, the question that we want to answer right now is critical race theory being taught in the Coeur d'Alene School District?
Yes, to answer you. They say critical race theory is not being taught. And the trick to that is that the theory is not being taught, but it is being practiced. And we know it's being practiced because all throughout the frameworks, they talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And those are the hallmark terms of critical race theory. Anywhere you see them talk about equity, they're talking about leveling the playing field, about equaling shares out. The definition, I use James Lindsay a lot, newdiscourses.com, give him a plug. Equity means adjusting shares in order to make citizens A and B equal. It's an intentional redistribution of shares. And when you hear those terms, you know that we're talking about Marxism. And when you talk about diversity, that you're talking about different races and different cultures, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But these terms and what's being taught in the schools has a completely political objective. And so it's not about just learning about cultures and what foods do they eat and how do they celebrate this event. How do they celebrate Christmas versus how do we celebrate Christmas, for instance? We're not talking about that when we're talking about diversity. We're talking about race and inclusion. When we talk about inclusion, we're talking about safe spaces. And I understand that I'm not sure about two of the high schools, but I know that, and I saw it in the literature, that at least Lake City high schools have little stickers above doors now. And I would be surprised if they weren't in all the schools. Have little safe space stickers so they know they can go in there and talk to that teacher if they're feeling scared or feeling not safe for some reason. And we want our kids to feel safe, but this is a different, they pervert the terminology.
So, CRT is not being taught under the guise of CRT, but it's being disguised as people talk about social emotional learning.
Yes.
So people talk about these three words here.
Yes.
Explain to us a little bit about the social emotional learning and how that is going on in our schools, and how is that tied together with the words. Again, they're saying no CRT is being taught, but there's other things. How is that tied together with CRT?
Well, you mentioned social emotional learning, and I call social emotional learning the Trojan horse that allows equity to be introduced. So what they do is they'll talk to kids about their feelings. Like I've had parents contact me. My happy girl, she's now being taught to draw angry faces and a mad face, well, angry and unhappy faces, and to teach her about other feelings. And the mother was horrified that her daughter had come home with these really terrible looking faces. And they're like, what are they doing that in school for? And I just heard today that from a mother that third graders being taught by the school counselor about power. And that's what this is all about, is power. This is about taking over kids, using social emotional learning to take over kids' minds in the interest of social justice. And it's the goal of it is to destroy everything. And that's what people have to understand when they talk about critical race theory or critical social justice. Critical means to destroy, to tear down, and that's their goal, is to tear down our families, to tear down the children, to make them tools for the globalists, to make them social justice warriors, and it's nothing good.
A lot of teachers believe that they're not doing anything in teaching this. Is there anything that you can make them aware of? I think you've just talked about that, but there's anything special that you might ask them to look at deeply if you were going to be speaking to a teacher right now? We are talking to some teachers right now. What would you tell them to keep their eyes open for if you didn't?
Well, I know that they have sent. I have receipts through records requests of teachers and administrators being sent to Denver, and when I looked at the I can't think of the name right now. I'd have to look it up. PEBC, whatever it is. It's in Denver, and when you look at their site, they're all about training you to train kids for equity, and it's all about the same. It always goes back to these three terms. We're focused on equity and diversity and inclusion. Well, that's critical race theory, and there is no other way to look at it. Some teachers are saying, well, they're telling us that equity is if a kid's struggling in math, he gets extra help, or special needs kids. And I think you have
I do.
a story you shared with me today. We could talk about that.
Yeah. So this is something that came across my feed today, a question that was asked. I'm going to give this to you and let you see what you feel about it. What is your stance on equity replacing equality in our schools, specifically about special education? That's where a lot of people hammer on special education. If equality means everyone is treated the same and equity recognizes that different people need different support throughout their lives, then special education is certainly the manifestation of equity. What is your feeling on that?
And they're using that as a smokescreen. Equity does not mean, it means equal shares. It means equal outcomes, period. There is no other use for equity. And so when they say, oh, it's giving a kid extra help in math or giving the special needs kids this IEP, that has nothing to do with equity.
And you're not saying that these special needs kids need that special help.
Yeah, they already get it.
Yeah.
They have, under laws, they have every right to have special help, but that has nothing to do with equity.
Right.
That's not leveling the playing field. That's not making A and B equal. It's equal outcomes. That's equity.
Teachers out there are saying that I've talked to, teachers that we've talked to, retired teachers that we've talked to have said, all of this was packaged in a really nice, beautiful package, and it looks really, really nice. And you can see those words you use right there are all great words until you start digging into it deeply. And so your recommendation to parents, just as we kind of close this out, your recommendation to parents right now, what would you tell them to do, and where would you direct them to do if they really want to research this a little bit more?
What I've done, and that anybody can do, is you go to the frameworks. They've hidden all of this horror in plain sight. What I have done is I've gone to the references and I say, okay, who is this organization? And then I go to their website. For instance, Portrait of a Graduate. They got Portrait of a Graduate from portraitofagraduate.org, where they start out by saying how to fundamentally change your school system. So they're trying to change things, and I say not for the better, to introduce how to do this critical race theory, how to introduce these concepts and ideologies.
So the information is out there.
It's out there, but you have to do the research. You just have to follow the links, follow the threads.
Okay.
Who wrote it, what organization, what is their mission statement, look at the About Us statements, and it'll be clear that nothing but critical race theorists, writers, and organizations that are all about nothing but about social justice and equity and diversity inclusion. Every one of them has those words at their site. So it's pretty easy to find. It just takes some time.
Laura, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Glenn.
You are very welcome. And I'm sure if you have any questions We're going to have this information on my website, glenforcda.com. We're going to put it on our Facebook page too. Laura has also told me she will make herself available to any parent, any teacher who may have more questions. Don't find out the hard way. Don't find out by losing your child to this teaching, the way she had to do this. But what this did do for her is it put her on a quest to save our kids, to save our grandkids.
And our community.
And our community is exactly right. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you.